when it comes to content, I think there are two important things that people probably don't think about. One is the intent, and another is the moment. I think we are the only site till date in India which has hired from countries as diverse as Peru, and you name it. We have hired in Middle East, UK, US, Canada, of course, Australia, even China. I would read up, learn articles on HBR and all these sites. But when it comes to really running the business, there are more nuances. The context is different. Day-to-day things are different. So you have to adapt yourself accordingly.
How did the freelancing start? Is this the part of your new experiments to sort of bring in more revenue?
It was actually, because as I said, my blog, it started getting a lot of traffic, and I started earning from AdSense. But uh, I didn't have any money. Like, if I had money, then I would have probably continued it back then. But I didn't have money, and I had to make money immediately, to feed myself and my family. So then, that's when I thought that, I should probably explore freelance writing opportunities side by side, while I would also continue posting on my site, on my blog. Uh, to make money immediately, I should probably, explore that. And I explored it. I sort of approached a bunch of publications outside India, because I knew that in India there weren't many opportunities, and if there were, they wouldn't pay well. So I started writing for sites. I wrote guest articles first on, on ProBlogger, Darren's ProBlogger, and on a lot of big sites. And then eventually, I started writing for some bigger tech sites like Make Use Of. And back then, productivity used to be a huge niche. So there was a huge site called Dumb Little Man. So I sort of I was hired as a permanent full-time writer there. I mean, full-time, not full-time, I would say, but like a consistent writer. That I had to sort of write a set number of pieces every week. So I think that's how my freelance writing journey began, and that helped me connect with a lot of people around the world, and also ensure that a steady flow of income happens. And then I think this is what sort of sustained me for the next 2 years. I did try a bunch of other things. I tried affiliate marketing. Affiliate marketing sort of, slowly and steadily, that also came onto the scene, and people started exploring it, selling products. And there was this site called ClickBank, if you remember, and that had a lot of digital products, all sort of products. Some of them actually shady products. Now that I remember, and what people would do, they would create landing pages, and they would sort of copyright the hell out of the all the text on the landing page, and then they would direct traffic on it. It's basically arbitrage, right? They would use AdWords to direct traffic, and then make money out of the products. And the goal was to make more money and from selling the products, right? So a lot of these things were happening. I also tried a bunch of them, but eventually I figured out that building a long-term asset is what I want, because that is what will make me the big money. And also, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to invest in something long-term, and in the next 2-3 years, I developed that cushion, which allowed me to sort of do that, and without worrying about day to day or monthly paycheck. And that's when I started guiding tech in 2010. Because, and with that mindset that this is going to take time. I shouldn't expect quick returns out of it, and it's a long term. Just like everyone today is talking about long term investment in personal finance, right? Invest for the long term. Invest for the long term. I would say invest in building an asset for the long term if you can, and that's what I did, and that worked out well for me.
So you always saw blogging as a business and not as a thing that you could make quick money.
Yeah, I always saw that, because first, when I researched, I read, these people like Darren Rouse who talked about pro blogging, make money blogging. They were always very upfront, very straightforward, and very honest about how it works. And when I read them, I realized that okay, this is no get rich quick scheme. This is a very there's a long term thing which you have to do very consistently. And once you do consistently, slowly and steadily over the years, your traffic builds up, your articles start ranking. You also have to work hard at link building and all those things. But one thing that doesn't change is the time. right? You have to invest time in it. So, I always knew this. And when I started my own blog, I saw that, uh, see, I mean, getting a burst of traffic from a site like Dig and Stumble Upon, that is fine, but that cannot happen every day,
Mm.
right? It is just like that initial sort of launch burst of traffic. But in order to get traffic on a daily basis, it needs to have some source of traffic which sends you people every day. Now, the kind of content I was doing, those were basically tutorials, how-tos, guides, for the average consumer tech user, right? So for this, the best source of traffic is Google, because that's where people search for these things and then they land upon the articles. Today, I would say YouTube is also a great source for such traffic. Like, it's the second
Mm.
biggest search engine around the world.
Mm.
So people also search the similar stuff on YouTube as well. So, and for someone else making some different kind of a content, maybe, direct email newsletters would be that source of traffic, or, direct mail sort of in, ads and magazines, those would be source of traffic. So depending on the type of content you're doing, your source of traffic may or may not be a search engine. In my case, it was the search engine. And uh, since I learned about SEO and everything, I understood pretty quickly that this is, if you want to do it correctly, it's a long-term game, and that's how you would be able to build a sustainable business. So, I was pretty clear about it in my head that I'm going to do it as a business. Initially, I will create content, then I'll build a team. And then, I didn't have any specific goals in mind as to, I'm going to make it this big, or I'll hire this bigger team, or make this much money. Those specifics weren't clear in my head. And I also didn't sort of do any goal setting. I just
Right.
wanted that, I want to do it for the long term and see what happens.
Right. So when you started the blog, you also spoke about you want to make it into sort of team. But before getting into that, in early 2000s, you started this blog, right? And like you exactly said, since you are doing like a how-to tips and tricks in consumer tech, your majority of your traffic actually comes from search engines. Right? Did you ever feel that they were repeat audience, or how did you build a community? Because I'm presuming the concept of a newsletter probably did not exist back then, right? How did you
Yeah.
know that there are regular readers for your blog?
Right. So actually, this is interesting. And so, firstly, newsletter as a concept, it probably existed. I didn't know much about it. It
Mm.
came, for me, I learned uh, quite late about, that as a medium for building an audience. Now, so here's the thing, with when you say building a community or building a loyal audience, with the kind of content. Now, initially, of course, whenever you're starting something, you know that, building if you want to build a business, you're better off building a loyal audience who would come back to you again and again, consume your content again and again, and eventually maybe pay for a product which you might create, right? So these concepts were clear in my head, and I always tried for that. But eventually I realized, more I got deeper into the business, I understood some nuances and about the kind of content, and what kind of audience it brings, and how the business might be structured around it. So when it comes to content, I think there are two important things that people probably don't think about. One is the intent, and another is the moment, right? The
Mm.
intent is that with what intent you are going to consume the content. Now, the intent could be sort of, a micro or a intent, or a small sort of a fleeting intent, right? That let's say you're just heading out and you want to have a great dosa, right?
Mm.
You have some places in your mind, but you want to try some new place. You would maybe quickly open up Google or open up Zomato, and you'll search for that place, and try it. Okay, let's try this place, right? So this is like a micro intent, right? A fleeting intent, right? And then the another kind of intent is when you set aside time for doing something, for consuming content, right? You know that tomorrow GOT, new Game of Thrones episode, is going to come. You're going to set aside time to watch it. You're
Mm.
going to come from work, freshen up, have your water, have your beer, whatever, and then sit, because you have to watch Game of Thrones. This is what you can call like a deeper intent, a macro intent, right? So this is about intent. It could be either fleeting, uh, or it could be deeper or macro. Now, both have, it's not that one is better than the other. It's just different kinds of intent, right? And both serve a purpose. When you are searching for something, searching for a new dosa place, it served a big purpose for you, right? You would remember it. It searched,
Yeah.
and similarly, GOT, of course, you're spending so much time watching it, so of course, that serves a big purpose as well. So that is about intent, and then it is about the moment when you are consuming that content, how much time you're going to spend on it, and when is that moment happening. With fleeting intent, the content where the intent is fleeting, the moment is also small, right? You
Hmm.
don't spend too much time on it, right? You'll just, as soon as your purpose is solved, you will steer away from it. You're going to get on with your life, right? And of course, with the bigger moments, like, you can also say micro and macro moments, or smaller moments and deeper moments. With the bigger moments, obviously you're going to spend more time, and it sort of has a different play too, and that's where the bigger loyalty, sort of, that community, that happens here, you know and in both cases, like, whether you're watching GOT or sort of looking up a dosa place, it's high intent. Your intent is high. Now, there are low intent moments as well, like, just scrolling through Instagram, just scrolling through Facebook.
Hmm.
Those are low intent type of moments, right? So in our cases, I realized that this was very specific. You would search on Google for something, you will land up on the site, and your problem is solved, you're gone, right? It is very, very difficult to build a community around such kind of content, which I realized later, right? Because that is not the kind of content we were making, right? Even if we try, right? The kind of content we were doing, why would people say set aside time on a weekend to explore this kind of content? It doesn't make sense, right? This is utilitarian content, and this serves people at specific intent and specific moments, right, in their lives. So repeat visitors, we had to figure out certain things to ensure that, whenever in that fleeting moment a person is coming and we are able to solve their problems, they remember at least some parts of our content outside. So that's why I invested heavily in sort of the presentation of the content, making it really look good and, stand out from the crowd in a way, having our own design, branding, so that, some visual aspects of the entire site is sort of, subconsciously etched in the user's brain, so that when next time he Googles and he finds an article guiding tech, he might just remember that name. Even if he doesn't, let's say he sort of stumbles upon that article, immediately at looking at that entire site, it would strike him that, okay, maybe I have checked this site before. So why don't I sort of bookmark it? Right.
Hmm.
So he would just bookmark that site. So, this is the thing. See, I mean, a lot of people would talk about bounce rates, that, the bounce rate shouldn't be high in Google Analytics. It's not, you shouldn't look at it that way, because the bounce rate for the sites like ours, it would be very high. Why? Because, as soon as we solve the problem of the consumer through an article, a great article, why would he read another article which is not related to his problem, right? It
Problem.
doesn't make sense. Very few would do that, very few, right? But that doesn't mean we didn't help him. He would be very happy. We would get a lot of great comments that, my life was saved, and my uh, we used to make a list of those comments and share it on the Slack, on our Slack, that, this is what you are helping, you are changing lives, so to speak, like, we used to get great comments, but the community aspect, that never happened. So I mean, the kind of content we did, we would always rely on a growing user base and, traffic from Google. And eventually we did build a newsletter, and we sort of had a loyal set of audience, but it never reached the kind of scale that might happen in any other business because of the type of content we were doing. So, yeah.
Right, right. Did you ever, when was the first time you were recognized for like the brand, or like somebody else spoke about your brand outside the digital world, like probably when you meet them offline or something like that? Do you remember any such moments?
Well, early on, I think, yes, I think at one or two events, when people said that, okay, I've read your site, because
Hmm.
these meetups would happen, Twitter meetups and, blogging meetups and all. So, I do remember that, one or two people mentioning that, you're doing a good job at your site, and, it's different kind of content. It's not tech news, because, the
Mm.
tech news sites had started
Popping
cropping
up,
up
yeah.
then, but yeah, but we weren't doing news. And we did try news later and failed miserably at it. But
Mm.
uh, I think, yes, I mean, that's when, slowly and steadily in India, people in my circle, at least, they started recognizing that, okay, this is a site that exists and it does this kind of content.
Right.
So it would happen in events. And also, when I would get emails, and if I would be at chatting in a forum or something, and someone would mention, especially when I would stumble upon links, like, let's say I'm reading a life hacker article and suddenly I see that, okay, they're linking to a GT article. So that would
Mm.
be, a moment of pride for me.
Right.
So these are the kinds of things I did stumble upon a lot. And that's when I realized that, okay, we are doing something which is worth continuing to do. So that's.
Right, right. Interesting. I want to touch a little bit upon the team aspect, right? Since you always saw even the blogging in early days as a business, when was the first time you hired another person to sort of take them into your journey?
Well, I think it was after a year or so when because for the first year, I did most of the writing. And
Mhm.
then after a year or so, I felt a need that, this is a time to expand and get some freelance writers on board. And that's when I would say, I made my first hire. Now, there are some interesting stories around it.
Mhm.
So I think we are the only site till date in India which has hired from countries as diverse as Peru,
Mhm.
and, you name it. We have hired in Middle East, UK, US, Canada, of course, Australia, even China. We, because see, in those days, I mean, I would just post ads on online forums and people across the world would apply, right? And then, PayPal was there, so I would pay them using PayPal. And I would want to hire people where, irrespective of, location, because that, that was sort of the kind of business I wanted to build. Because, I myself was sort of working remotely, right? I mean, I was working from home. So why should I restrict myself to just, hiring people from India? And, also I wanted to make sure that, I try and hire people who have English as their natural language, their first language, that will sort of help me spend less time editing their articles. So
Right.
I hired from around the world. And the first bunch of hires were actually quite diverse, I would say, quite diverse. And the Indian part of the team came in much later. Like, eventually when this tech blogging started, a lot of tech blogs came up in India, and this sort of started taking shape in India as well. That's when, the new breed of tech writers sort of came on the forefront. And that's how I came to know about them, right? The
Mm.
engineering graduates and everyone who was sort of trying out tech writing as a side hustle.
This was roughly what time?
This was roughly, I think, 2013, 12, 13,
Mhm.
2012, 13, right? But 2009, 10, 11, I was hard pressed to find, a lot of. I did try initially, I posted ads on Naukri and all, but the applications that came in, they were definitely not suited for this job, right?
Mhm.
So I am sort of hired from outside India. I had a university student from China,
Mhm.
and he would use a VPN to access sites and right. And you wouldn't believe this. The money which I would send him through PayPal, it would take like 3 months to reach him. I don't know what was the reason, but it was somehow not easy. And still, he was so passionate. He just wanted to. He didn't worry about the money. He was like, just give me an opportunity. I want to do this, and it was quite interesting. And so I hired, like, part-time writers, people. There was sort of I think, an investment banker in the UK who was really good with, who was extremely into consumer tech. He wanted to write, and he was hired. Then, a lot of people don't know this. Many of the GT alumni, the writers who sort of started their tech writing career at GT, they went on to do great things. One of them became sort of a permanent writer. at Lifehacker. Then, another ended up becoming an editor at Wirecutter, which was later acquired by NYT, right? So, and then another writer whom I picked up, I would also sort of try and see, because, comments were a big thing back then. People would comment, I would reply, so I would also see who is consistently commenting on our articles, who is, sort of sharing new ideas. So I picked one of the writers from one of our comments, and he ended up becoming like our first Mac writer. He would write on iOS and Mac, and then he went on to found his own writing agency. He wrote for a lot of big sites, Fast Company, Wired. He runs his own agency today. He has just published a book, right? So we still sort of follow each other on Twitter and Facebook, and so talk to each other whenever we can. So that this so this is like these cool things happened over the years, and then eventually I found people in India who could work for me, and then I trained them, and a lot of writers, and then eventually I hired Ashish, who became my main man when it came to the YouTube channels and all. So overall, when I think about it, if I were to think about it, that the team building part has been really very interesting over the years, because it was, I didn't come from a background where I exactly knew how to, build a team or, follow the traditional ways. So that was sort of a blessing in disguise for me, because
Yeah.
I could sort of explore new ways to find people, and I would just approach people and contact them, and that, hey, so this writer I was talking about, or I think not this writer, I think another writer who also stuck with us for a very long time. None of them were actually writing at that time. They were like, we don't think we can do it. And I said, why don't you try it? Yeah, from your comments, I'm seeing that you have a passion for it. Just give it a shot. Give it a shot. I'll pay you. Don't worry about it. So, and a lot of these writers, they were not writing at that time when they started with GT. And then eventually they sort of started writing on GT, and they loved it. And they started writing for other sites as well, and, go on to do bigger and better things.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, right? A lot of the stuff that you're talking about, those teams still hold true today also, right? Today we are talking about remote work, we're talking about having a diverse set of teams, and something that you tried it out like a decade before that, right? And
Right.
also, like you said, it's a blessing in disguise when you don't have any common reference point, then you can go wild or crazy. Even we wouldn't know that's a crazy thing. Only when we look back, probably we know, okay, we did some interesting stuff. Like when you're doing it, probably at that time, you thought, this is the way probably to go about it.
Right. It was just, it was just like sort of, you would feel like you were winging it, but then you would also, you would also feel that, whatever you think is the right way, you should try it out. Right.
Yeah.
Because nobody was there to sort of handhold me or teach me. See, I mean, I would read up, learn articles on HBR and, all these sites. But when it comes to really running the business, there are more nuances. The context is different. Day-to-day things are different. So you have to adapt yourself accordingly. And I mean, you rightly mentioned, a lot of these things still hold true today. Let's say making content consistently, right? Doing it for the long term. This is what, the new age YouTubers are teaching, right? So I, sometimes see that and I say that, man, this, I don't know, this was like true a decade back, and this is still true today. And, people
Yeah.
are sort of preaching this, and good for them, like,
Yeah.
because these are the truths.
Yeah.
And, remote work. So remote work, again, like, it wasn't that popular back then. It eventually, this thing slowly and steadily picked up. People started understanding that, internet is a medium where you can actually make money while doing something. And, to this, I don't know, this, it feels just fascinating to me looking at the content landscape today. It
Yeah.
just sort of, a lot of it is nostalgia for me. But back then, branded content didn't exist. That was the AdSense money. That was the only way one could make money off YouTube videos. So one had to look at, how much money you were making, and the Hindi channel was doing quite badly. But when I saw the growth rate, I saw that, okay, we should probably not worry about how much money we are making with the Hindi channel. but we should focus on growing it. There were times when I would not go to the office for days, and it would
Hmm.
just work as well and also grow, right?
Hmm.
It was just, it wasn't dependent on me at all. I had a bunch of self-motivated people, and I would just sometimes go to the office to guide them, just check things as to everything is fine or not. You want to be a YouTuber, you want to be a successful LinkedIn creator, Instagrammer, anything. The first step is to create content consistently, and you can only do that if you like that process, because the returns will come maybe after a year or after 2 years or 3 years. Who knows? They will come, but it could take a long time, and you can only survive if you enjoy that process and you do it on a consistent basis.